Hello, my name is Meg and I am the yarn dyer behind Megs & Co. And I am so glad that you are joining me on my YouTube channel. Today we are going to be dyeing up 2 pans of a brand new exclusive colorway that I am working on just for LYS Day. LYS Day, otherwise known as Local Yarn Store or Little Yarn Store, is April 29th. It is a day where we celebrate our little local yarn stores, much like maybe Record Store Day, if you've heard of that. Yarn dyers, designers, we are all working to support our small locally owned and independent stores by offering them product that is going to be exclusive just for them to sell in person in their brick and mortar stores. This is my 3rd year developing a color just for the day. I've done a little bit of testing on the side, but now I'm ready to jump right in. So these are going to be my R&D batches. There's a chance that one of these is the color that that will be Local Yarn Store Day, or potentially I'll take my notes from how the 2 individual colors come out and land somewhere in the middle. But this is how I start my R&D process. I usually have 2 pans of yarn. Sometimes I choose to do the same type of yarn together. Other times, like today, maybe I want to see how colors are going to look on the 2 different wools. So today, I have chosen 2 different wools. In this pan, I've got 5 skeins of my BFL sock, which is a 100% superwash BFL or blue face Leicester wool. And in this pan, I have my classic sock, which is a 75% superwash merino wool, 25% nylon, also a fingering or a sock weight. So, all right. So I've definitely been, thinking, going back through some of my pictures and notes of colors that I've done. And I also, want to make sure that the color kind of matches maybe some of the other colors that I've done in the past. I don't want it to be the same, but, if you were lucky enough to pick up a skein of the LYS Day colorway last year, it would be really cool to have something that kind of goes along and complements it. So I'm kind of sticking in that green-blue family, but I want it to be a little bit more intense. So I will be taking very detailed notes because this is a colorway that I'm going to have to replicate in volume. So I've pre-measured out all the colors that I think I'm going to try today, and how I measure all of my dyes, I use a scale. This is just a jewelry scale. You can find them on Amazon. They're not very expensive, but what I like about these jewelry scales is that they go out to 2 decimal places. So I measure everything in grams. So I can measure everything down to a 1/100th of a gram, which is really great for precise measurements. So I've weighed everything out, and for now, until I record what I have the volumes of all of the dyes I've mixed up. So in this particular case, I have a 0.33 gram mixture of black and magenta, and a 0.3 mixture of blue, and I've added this to 400 mils. When I'm finished, I'll go back and actually calculate the grams per weight of wool that I've added to this yarn. A lot of math I just threw at you, so hopefully your eyes didn't glaze over with that one. Let's get started. Let's stop chatting. Let's get started. So, like I said, I have 2 ideas for what I want to do today. So I'm going to start with this one. I did a virtual fiber festival where essentially I get online and dye some yarn live. It's a really great event that I look forward to every year. It's something that started over COVID. And so I dye live, kind of just like I'm doing right now. But it's a one-of-a-kind colorway. I don't write it down. I just have fun. So the colorway that I did for that back in January, it was a very, I loved it. It had blues and greens and yellows. but it was also almost like a little warm at the same time, even though we had lots of blues and greens and yellows. So I was kind of thinking of doing something similar to that. Then I also had a completely different idea. Recently I've been spinning some yarn, and the yarn, or the fiber that I happen to be using, has these little pops of mint green that I think, like, every time one comes through, it just delights me. And so I have a vision of this very subtle minty green that's flowing in and out of deep blues and deep greens. So yeah, we're gonna see what happens. So I need to take careful notes, so I'm gonna record that I just added my 200 mils of this beautiful yellow. So that I can do this again. So then in this pan, I want to create a base of blue. So somewhere in here, I mixed up, I think it's you. Let me see. It's definitely you. Okay, so I mixed up a beautiful blue. This is just a primary blue color. I want to cool down this yarn. I want a background of ocean blue. Just mixing it up. I love these like little mini kitchen whisks. They work so well. And then just like you rinse off paintbrushes, I just have a little water bucket. Okay, where is my, oh, it's in my pocket. So in this pan, I want to create just a very, very subtle background of blue. This is a primary blue, and it's very strong. So I mixed this up to be at I meant to mix it up to be at a 1% stock solution, and wasn't paying attention, added way too much water. So now it's actually a 0.1% stock solution. So I'm going to add 10 mils to the water. And that's going to be equivalent to 0.1 grams because this glue is so strong. And I'm using, I'll show it to you in a second after I put this yarn back down. You can see how light blue that is. And you can see how little I put in there, and yet we're still getting blue. So it's just, it's going to give us a nice icy background. Yeah, yeah, yes. I love this blue. It's a good blue. So I just used this little syringe to measure. You can get these online on Amazon. I've seen a lot of times that they're available in medicine sections to give medicine to either like dogs or babies. And I really like for using it for precise measurement. So this has up to 5 mil increments. So I wanted 10 mils, so I just loaded it twice, and I know that I've gotten exactly 10 mils in here. And again, when I go back to calculate the amount of dye that I use for each individual skein, it's gonna allow me to scale up. So that was like the only thing that I'd really pre-planned was what colors I was going to start with. So now we're just going to flow. We're going to go for it. Okay, so let's see what I've mixed up here. So I definitely know that I'm going to want this minty color, and this is another color that goes a long way. So there's only a teeny tiny bit of dye in here. 0.3 grams of dye is in here, and I'm gonna, that sucky's a little too dirty. I'm gonna take a gander that even that's gonna be a little too dark for what I want. These little suckies, again, you can get them online. They're just like squeeze bulbs or squeeze droppers. A lot of times, again, they come with like medicine, and they're really great that you can just add a little drop just to see what it's going to look like on the yarn. And then that way you know, is it too light? Is it too dark? The biggest thing, if it's too dark, you can't go back. You can't take that dye away. If it's too light, you just add more dye or add more dye to your mixture before you add it. So in that case, I agree, it's just a little too dark. So what do I have here? I've got 300 mils. That's such an awkward volume for me to measure with the tools that I have at the moment, but actually I've got my cylinder. So there we go. All right, so I just cut that in half. And then I'm going to add water. So there is no such thing as a white dye, at least when it comes to dyeing protein fibers. So for white, when we want to make something lighter, you add water, you dilute it down. So we cut it in half and then essentially cut it in half again by adding back all this volume of water. And so I'm hoping that now, yes, this is the color I'm looking for. So now the fun part. So I'm just gonna pour in little stripes. Oh, I love it. It's like a little Easter egg. And then I'm gonna take my spoon and just work to kind of spread this just a little bit. I like my yarns to be just a little bit more blended, so that when you knit them up, you don't have those long sections of color that end up, you know, kind of pooling. And when they're knit up, a lot of times in socks and stuff, they create really fun pooling opportunities. But when you're getting into garment knitting, I personally just don't like that pooling effect, because it always pools somewhere where you just don't want it to pool. So instead of pouring potentially half the dye on one end and creating a long stripe, I'm creating little stripes, and then that way as you're knitting, you're going to get a little pop of color rather than big sections of color. And then I just break up those edges again so that it's a little bit more of a fade from one stitch to the next stitch, just to create that blended fabric. Okay, what's next? What's next? It's like so hard on the camera, because normally if I'm like, I don't know what to do, I'll, you know, maybe go upstairs, get a drink of water, pet my dogs, and kind of think about it, which I guess I can edit out me doing that, but I really didn't want to spend a lot of time editing so that I could spend more time on getting content out, if that makes sense. So, and I think there's like something to be said about being just a little bit under pressure. Okay, so now I'm kind of thinking we need to balance out some of this lightness with some darkness. So I have a teal color, and again, this is very concentrated, so I am going to cut this in half because I don't even have to test it. This is a lot of dye. And fortunately, I measured this one to be 400 mils, so it's a little bit easier for me to cut it in half because the graduations in my in these measuring cups are in 100 mils. Okay, so this is a teal color, and I'm thinking that this will be good because we have a beautiful little robin's egg blue on the underside, and now we have these pops of that mint green. So the teal, it's like if you added black to the color that's in the middle of that blue and that green, if that makes sense. So I think it's going to add some really nice contrast pops to our color, but also kind of, you know, pull our first two colors together a little bit. It's going to be really dark, but I think that's okay. So I'm just going to, again, just add, yeah. I'm going to start there. I'm going to get my spoon and just work that towards that minty color without, I want it to be kind of running into it to, again, they get that, you know, faded look as your stitches are coming off your needles or your hook, but without actually burying that minty color. So I am working with superwash yarn, which takes the dye very, very quickly. So I have to kind of work fast if I want to spread this around, because I'm not really going to have a lot of time, because it's just going to go right to that yarn. I'm also working with pans that are already warm and heated. The yarn was soaking so that it was good and saturated for about an hour in citric acid water before I started. And then I turned the pans on while I was getting the cameras up, so it had a good 30 minutes on the heat as well. So this yarn is primed to be taking this color right now. It just wants to suck it up. So I'm just going to go ahead. I just want to make sure that all my skeins look the same. So like this side of the pan has a really dark spot, so I want to even that out, because this is one skein, this is one skein, and this is another skein. And although we can never guarantee that every single skein looks identical, anything that I can do, so like this side also looks just a little lighter. Anything that I can do to kind of even those things out is all for the better. Oh my gosh, I love that. I'm really happy with that. Okay, so I'm gonna let that sit. Teal can take a bit of time to fully exhaust. I find that blue dyes in general just take a little bit more time. It's always those strong colors, you know, our bright reds and our deep blues. They just need a little bit more time on the heat. So I'm going to put the lid on. It's going to heat things back up a little bit. And let's start working on this batch. Okay, so here's where I'm going to just jump right in with the chances, taking chances here. So this is a brown color that I mixed up from a couple different primaries. I wanted a very neutral brown. A lot of times I find that brown dyes never actually look brown. They, you know, brown is essentially a mixture of all the colors. And a lot of the commercial dyes that I found, they tend to lean in one way. They tend to either look very yellow or very purple. So this is a recipe that I've worked on to get a very neutral brown. I would say, if anything, it does lean a little bit more yellow, but it shouldn't lean purple. And so I'm just taking my whisk, and there was just some dye that was stuck to the top there. And I'm also going to bring this all the way up to volume. I didn't add all the water that I normally add because I had to carry these from where I mix into this filming area. So, okay, so we're just, again, gonna just go ahead and pour. I think I'm gonna do 2 sections. Ooh, that's dark. It's such like a good, it's so weird to say that it's a good brown because you think brown and you're like, blah. But like, brown is such a great balancer, especially if you're trying to create a very wearable wardrobe with your knitting or your crochet. It helps colors to match each other. And I find that it helps your finished garments just go with more clothes that are already in your wardrobe because they're just neutral. So I'm just evening out that color. And I do like how it's nice and dark right here, so I'm gonna leave that because I think it's nice how this top part is just a little bit lighter and we get a nice dark pop of color here. Part of yarn dyeing is so much trust and really learning how things are going to look afterwards. So this might look very dark in the pan right now. Just gonna even out right here. This might look super dark in the pan, but after things have exhausted and then have been washed and dried, every color tends to lighten up significantly. And it's something that has just taken me a lot of time to get used to. So if I want a very, very super dark chocolatey brown, essentially it's got to look almost black in the pan for it to stay that dark after I've dried it. You know, think about it. You know, you pull your laundry out of the wash and the clothes just always look darker. It's kind of that same concept that the water allows the colors to appear darker. So next color, that's teal. I don't want you. And what are you? You're not labeled. All right. Well, I think the one that's not labeled is the one that I want because maybe it's this one. I think that one is one that I want eventually because I guess process of elimination. I know that I mixed it up, right? So this is a blue color, and it's a very warm blue color, so I think it's gonna pair really well with this brown. So I'm just gonna pour it on these other sections. So again, trust the process. Like, I know that this looks kind of muddy, but I am going to trust, just based on my experience, that these blue sections are going to be blue and these brown sections are going to be brown. Plus, because of the way that the yarn is kind of scrunched up in the pan, there's a lot of pockets of white. And so we're going to let this sit and cook and exhaust, and then seek out those white spaces to add even more color on top of this really nice dark background. Oh my gosh. I am in love. I am in love. Okay. Where's my towel? So I just want to make sure I got all the dye off my fingers because I want to flip this over. So I really like how this is looking here. I'm definitely not done with this side because there's still some white space, especially on the edges. I just didn't really know what I wanted to do yet, and I didn't want to lose that mint color. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to layer color on the other side on the edges, and then that way, see, if I add it on this side, it's going to bleed and just bury that mint, and then we've lost it. But if I add it to the reverse side, it has a lot more layers before it can bleed onto that mint. So we should be able to preserve it while adding some color to our ends. And then I'll flip it over and see what we need to do. So one thing that I'm noticing right away is that this this back side is not as blue as I was hoping for. There's definitely some really nice sections of ice blue there, but we've kind of lost that blue. So I think before I go any farther, I'm going to add a whole bunch more of that original blue that we added. So I want it to be on that back side because, again, I don't want to bury that mint color. So if we added 10 mils before, plenty. All right. Mix this up. This is such a great shoulder workout. I actually already did my workout this morning and I did shoulders, and I hope you can't see me shaking. Okay, yeah, I think that's gonna really help to fill in. And give us a little bit more of a blue canvas background. I'm already seeing that light blue really coming up. Okay, so I want to let that blue fix to the yarn first. So instead of adding more color, maybe we should try a speckle. So when I'm developing colors, I tend to start with the dye first, and then I speckle. And it's funny because then when I start doing production dyeing, I want to speckle with the lowest water table possible because you get just very sharp, brilliant speckles. So once I know where I'm going to be placing everything, I'll actually speckle first and then add the dye second because I have my diagram of exactly where all the colors are getting added. Little backstory that maybe you didn't need. So I am going to speckle, so I am going to put on my respirator. Dyes are not considered toxic, but they are very fine micro powders that are not good to inhale, so respect your lungs, wear a mask. I got this respirator from Home Depot, just in the painting section. Okay, so I just speckled with a dark green. It's a dark green that I know that will kind of break out between yellow and a little bit of blue. So you get some really nice, interesting speckling effects with this color. So I'm just going to let that sit. I don't want to disturb the speckles because I want to keep them nice, sharp, and crisp. So we're going to let that sit for a hot minute. And let's check in with things over here. A little dark and stormy over here. That blue was really strong, and I gotta say, I really should have tested it first because I feel like we're losing all of our white space here because I just dumped so much blue on here that I'm really running out of places to work with here. But that's okay. You can see how there's still a ton of blue in that water. But it's getting pretty clear. We're getting there. And then look at this backside. I am happy with this backside. Because we still have a lot of light space that I really want to speckle this. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to flip this over. And I always try to make sure that the inside skeins are now the outside skeins, again, just so that the pans, I have 5 skeins of yarn in here, so I just want to make sure that everything is even. If you leave the skeins on the outside every single time, a lot of times the dyes tend to kind of creep up the edges, so you end up with a middle skein that is much lighter and not as saturated as the other ones. So if I just keep rotating every time I flip, so again, somebody else is on the outside versus the inside, then you get a more consistent dye lot. Okay, once again, I feel like I just really need to think about this. What do I want to do with you? And then what do I have? What do I have? So that icy blue color that we added to the water, I'm kind of thinking of pouring it on here because it's really gonna kind of pump up that intensity of blue. And because it is more of like a bright aqua color, I think it's gonna trick the eye into thinking like that there's a little bit more light in that background. So again, I'm going to start, let me give this a mix because it's been sitting. So I'm gonna start small. Again, you can always add more. And we already have a lot of blue, even though it's a different blue, we already have a lot of blue in this. Already have a lot of blue in this dye pan. So I added 10 mils. That was that first measurement that we added to this pan. And I'm just gonna give it a little toast over these light areas. Yeah, I like that. I like that. So I like how it's going to kind of intensify the blue spots and turn our yellow spots a little bit more of a teal or even a minty color, kind of like this one. So 10 mils was great for that top spot. I like that. I like that a lot. Sorry about that. So like my camera temporarily shut off. I don't know what was that. Hopefully we didn't actually lose anything. So where were we? We were adding blue to this batch. So what I think I was saying is that a lot of times I feel like I've done this pan very differently than I normally would. So normally, I like to work light to dark, again, because you can always add more color, but it's hard to take it away. So I tend to start with the lightest colors that I plan to work with, and then working up to our deep dark colors. So like if I'm going to have spots of black on a colorway, that's going to be last because you can't take that black away. So this one I feel like I just, went totally opposite of that, and we added a deep blue and a deep brown. So when I go to recreate this, I will probably actually start with the lighter blue in the pan, similar to how I did with this guy, and then build up the color from there. But this is what R&D is for, and I really hope that this is inspiring you to give it a go, because it's really not hard. The hardest part is taking that chance and just dumping that color on the yarn. And I'm telling you, yarn is so forgiving that I have yet to see a skein of yarn, either out of my own pans or in different like dyeing Facebook groups that I'm in, that were just ugly. It doesn't happen because there is a project for every color. So no skein of yarn is just ugly. It doesn't happen. And you can always over dye it if it's perhaps just not something that suits you. You can always over dye it, and you can always over dye it black. But it is so much fun. It's so much fun to see the colors mix and come alive, and then come alive again as you create your fabric later with the yarn. I'm going to add even more blue. I don't know, I'm just feeling in a super blue mood. I'm just having fun now. I love this. Okay, welcome back yet again. My camera turned off on me again. Not sure what's going on there. I switched out the batteries. Maybe that will help. So while I had that like brief moment to walk away from the pans, I was thinking that what I think that this needs is a little bit of some teal and some green. So I'm going to speckle it with that same color that I speckled this pan with. It's a nice kind of foresty, tealy green, and I think it's going to play really nicely with these colors. Okay, so you might be able to see that my water table is getting really high in this pan. So speckling is definitely a little bit of a challenge because it's really just kind of getting in the water. But again, because this is an R&D batch, it's going to give me an idea of how the colors are going to work together. And then I will rewrite my recipe to be a little bit more fitting to the dye process. So all the speckling will happen first when the yarn water table is at its lowest, and then I will add all the colors. Play, oh my gosh, I love this. I have no idea what I was about to say because this is beautiful. Okay, well, there might be a clear winner for which colorway is going out for local yarn store day. Oh my gosh, I'm in love. Okay, so now it's time to flip this over. And I'm very happy with the amount of blue that we added because we have these nice layers of icy blue. And I just love this mint color. So I'm trying to plan out what I want to do. I think I want to add the rest of the mint color. And I have this, there's my whisk. I have this kind of tealy blue color. So this blue color, I had a new collection release in January, and this, not supposed to have favorites, but I do have a favorite. This colorway is the base of I Can't Hear You Over My Book. So it's like a jeans blue with like, oh my god, with like a hint of green. Nobody saw that. And you can see how I think that this color is going to play really nicely with the colors that are already in the pan. So I've got a little bit of that mixed up, but we need to dilute this way down. And I'm going to give it a little test. Love it. So it's kind of like a teal, but it's a little bit more blue than it is green, if that makes sense. So this is pretty dark. So I don't want to just dump it onto where we already put our dark sections of dark teal on the other side, because again, I don't want to create blocks of color. I want to create little blended blips of color. So I'm going to pour kind of more alongside. I am running out of room. And then because I cannot get enough of this this mint, I'm going to fill in. And just gently disturb to mix this around. I feel like this middle skein has a lot of mint, but I want some more over here. Oh, this is good. This is really good. I am very excited about this. So now I'm going to speckle with a dark navy blue, because I feel like we have a lot of heavy greens in here and I want to bring it back to blue. And I might also speckle with a little bit more of that green that we used on the other side, because I love it, and why not? All right, so I did not speckle with the green. You can see how this dark blue, once it hit the water, it kind of spread out quite a bit. And again, that's because the water table is just so high that it's getting into the water and spreading. So for the sake of this research batch, I'm not going to put that green, because then we're going to lose all this beautiful mint and teal color that we've added. But I think for my final my final recipe, I'll probably speckle both sides with dark green, then the one side with the dark blue, and then add all the colors. And that way you'll get some really beautiful mixes of sharp, dark contrasting speckles that are going to pop and fill your fabric on this background of just light. This is I'm excited about this. I haven't been excited about a colorway like this in a little too long. It means I need to get back to the research pans. Okay, so what's going on over here? I feel like this is just such a totally different vibe. I always feel bad for this pan, because like I really do like what's going on here, but it's just so different that I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do with you right now. It's like a totally different mood here. But I do like it. So you can see, like, as you pull it out of the water, you're going to see a lot more of these blues and greens. It's like a, I don't know, like a lagoon, Deep Water Lagoon. Right, and yeah, we have lots. We still have lots of good light sections to work with. So what I'm thinking, that awesome blue teal color that we added to this batch, I'm going to add here. And I'm out of water, so I'm going to just steal some. And essentially, I just wanted to make sure that this is dilute so that as it splashes directly onto the yarn, that it's not so dark that it's just going to bury and muddy things. And I also want enough volume that I can get a good spread across the whole pan. There's something so satisfying with that. Oh yeah, this color is like magic. Look at this. So I'm not sure how much you can see in the camera versus me just being all up in it in my face. But this blue teal, which it would be this if it didn't have all these other colors, that is the magic. Like, that is incredible. So I'm really liking what I'm seeing. And I think at this point, I'm going to stop with this because I love it. And I worry that if I were to add just a little bit more, that's when it's going to get pushed over the edge and I'll lose it. I know I said earlier that there's no such thing as ugly yarn, but you can have yarn in your stash that potentially you have no idea what project to use for, or that you end up over dyeing. And I'm loving this. It's got blue and teal and just a little bit of brown. So I'm going to let this just go and let it heat all the way up, and then I'll probably do a bit of inspections in the sense of pulling it out, making sure that there's no bare spots, and if there are, I think I'm going to add that same bluish teal color to any of those spots that look maybe just a little too light or just need a little bit more. And I'm happy. I'm very happy. So what happens next? So I'm going to let these heat up. I'm going to let them heat for probably a good 45 minutes. I want that dye to be fully exhausted and that water completely clear. Then I cut the pans off and let them come to a slow cool. Usually I just leave them overnight. I'm just giving it a little look to see. There's lots of blue in this water still. So I'll let them just sit overnight. Get all the way down back to room temperature, and then I will wash them, give them a good soak. I like to soak them in Eucalan because it adds a little bit of that oil and conditioner back to the yarn. I feel like the yarn really gets stripped down between the spinning process. I wash them again before I dye them. Then they go through the acid dyeing process. They get washed again. So, you know, just like if you only shampooed your hair for like 2 weeks, you'd really want a good conditioning bath. So I feel like that was a really long way for me to just say I put it in a little bit of Eucalan, spin dry it out, hang it up, and then I will compare my recipe to what I'm seeing and really look at those skeins. Once they're dried, I'll look at them under maybe natural light, inside light, and really seeing how it's looking and what I like, what I don't like, and write up my final recipe based on that. So these batches, I do have a section on my website for lab batches. So this is yarn that would end up in those lab batches. You know, these are those skeins that help me in that R&D process. And sometimes those lab batches look very close, if not the same as the color that they're going to become. But essentially, because I usually will change my process of dyeing from a let's play, let's have fun, let's throw color, let the color decide what we're going to do. And then I have to translate that into production. So production as in scale up, you know, dyeing 100 skeins at a time. So just for that reason alone is why a lot of times these very first batches aren't necessarily the ones that get labeled with the color. So anyway, I really hope that you enjoyed dyeing yarn with me. If you have any questions about yarn dyeing, is there a process that you want to see? Is there a technique you want to see? Is there any part of the process that as you're watching, you're like, I have no idea what that lady is doing on the YouTube? Drop it in the comments, or you can send me an email. Go to my website. It is megsandco.com. There's a contact form. That contact form goes straight to my email inbox, and you can ask me any questions you have. You know, anything that you're curious about. I'd love to dye my next batch based on what you guys want to see. So again, thank you so much for joining me. And on April 29th, make sure that you head out to your local or little yarn stores, give them your support, and create something beautiful. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you back soon.